Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. So today I'm going to be asking essentially a question. I'm going to be doing one of my, I call them Wild Rift philosophy videos, which I haven't done in a while. Basically, we're just going to ask a question and kind of talk about that. And the question I'm asking is basically, is Wild Rift actually really a team game, or should you treat it essentially as a single player game where your teammates are basically bots? And so I'm just going to talk about, the benefits to doing each, and then after that, I'm sort of going to explain to you guys, why. I also want to acknowledge this is mostly relating to solo queue and maybe duo queue. This, when it comes to 5Q or, playing with like a complete team, of course, in that case, you're going to treat it a lot more team based, but for solo queue, it's a little bit more nuanced, and so we're going to talk about that. So starting off with like the benefits of treating it like a team game. So treating it like a game where you actually pay attention to your teammates, you try to help your teammates out, you don't play super selfish, and you play more, for your team. So this definitely can lead to your team tilting less, because let's say you're a jungler, for example, and you actually gank your teammates frequently, even if they're not necessarily doing well, you could potentially, stop them from tilting. And so sometimes I get comments when I make videos telling people to play really selfish, and they say, well, in theory, this works really well, but then I don't gank my teammates, and they will end up tilting, and they'll kind of run it down, and this, is really frustrating. And that is a completely real thing that happens. When you end up not ganking someone, they might end up tilting. Now, I would of course argue that that doesn't mean you should gank them, because usually if they're bad enough to run it down, they're probably going to run it down anyways as soon as one thing goes wrong. And just generally giving them gold, when they're a player who's probably already losing lane, already died, that's their fault. However, it's definitely still true that if you play more towards those teammates and you play more around their kind of, interesting mental, then you can prevent them from tilting, which is a benefit overall. Secondly, the game is definitely very unique. Like, you can't just do the exact same thing every game. There's nuance to the game, especially when you get to a higher rank, which requires you to have some type of non-program thinking where you're not just following, the same game as though all of your teammates are bots. You have to react to a unique situation. And so treating your teammates like real humans means that you're going to be more paying attention to like the specific kind of, approach that they have to the game, and changing the way you play based on that. So that's definitely a big thing, is understanding every game is unique, and you do need to change the way you play based on that. You can't just literally do the same thing every game. And if you kind of think of your teammates more as actual people, it maybe helps you with that a bit. I'm not saying that when you treat your teammates as bots, you're literally just going to be, like doing the exact same thing every time, but it definitely is a bit more of a like, streamlined way to play the game that is more, similar every game. And then lastly, I mean, it feels pretty satisfying to like obviously make really nice plays with your team. You can have a lot better coordination. So maybe, since you're paying more attention to your teammates and kind of what they want in the game, you're possibly making some good plays with them, kind of outplaying the enemy together, or just making like cooler plays. And it's kind of more fun to interact with your teammates more and think of them more as that. So those are kind of the main things I would say about treating it more like a team game and actually, playing for your teammates and rather than playing really selfishly. Getting into some of the main points then for why, you might want to treat the game more as almost a single player game. So basically what I mean by this is essentially treating your teammates like bots, where sometimes you're gonna, get the game on easy mode where you end up just getting teammates that are better than your opponents who are also bots. Sometimes you're gonna get the game on, a normal difficulty where it's like, oh, the game's not super hard, my bots aren't really much different than their bots, I just have to do better than, than the enemy bot, and then I win. And then sometimes you have to play on hard mode where your entire team is running you down, and you just have to accept that this is part of the game. So there's a couple of reasons why this is really useful. The first is that it's easier to accept losses if you just treat your teammates as bots. Like, if you think of it as like, oh yeah, every once in a while I'm just going to get a game where my teammates run it down and just try to lose on purpose, it's not as hard to kind of, accept the fact that you lost the game, because it's just kind of like, yeah, that's just going to happen within every, say, 20, 30, 50 games, whatever. I'm going to get teammates who I can't win because, these bots are just too bad, and just the game does that sometimes. So kind of makes it easier to accept these types of things. Also, you have more control in your own hands. So if you're playing really selfishly, you're focused on your own gameplay, which you'll kind of do if you treat them, again, as bots. Then you kind of just have a lot more control yourself, because you're putting a lot more gold on yourself rather than trying to play your teammates' game. You're playing your own game. You're being kind of patient, playing for yourself. This type of thing definitely makes it so you have a lot more control over the outcome, because if you play really, really well and you make very little mistakes, then you're just going to probably carry and win the game. But it's a lot harder to not make any mistakes, because you're putting all the gold, all the resources, everything into yourself, And so then you have to play really well if you actually want to win, which is why, you know, there's definitely pros and cons to it. But that would definitely be, you know, a good thing overall, that you have more control if you view yourself as good enough to take advantage of that control. And then also it just kind of works better with the matchmaking based on, you know, a lot of people talk about the matchmaking a lot. A lot of people are kind of exaggerate the extent to which it affects, you know, players' ranks. But it's certainly true that the matchmaking system is not the most balanced. You know, you'll have sovereign players playing with masters. Frequently, you'll have players just with very high skill gaps in lobbies of pretty much any rank. That's just the reality. That's just how it works. And so because of the fact that there's very large skill gaps in the lobbies, you kind of have to understand that I can't rely on my teammates because my teammates' skill level is just not going to be similar to my own. Like, sure, if you got to play with 4 other people who were the exact same skill level as you, it might make sense to try to play more similarly around them and whatever. But usually, you know, if you're having pretty good stats, you're probably going to be one of the better players in your lobby. And if you're one of the worst players in your lobby, then you should probably be focusing on getting better, which I would say would be a lot easier to do if you're, you know, focusing more on your own gameplay and treating your teammates as bots, rather than really focusing on kind of just letting your teammates carry you. So either way, it kind of makes sense based on how, you know, the matchmaking system sort of works, to be playing a bit more selfish and treating your team sort of like bots. So those are a lot of the benefits of it. We're going to talk in the end, you know, about really what I think you should do, but I just want to make it clear, I don't want you to confuse treating your teammates as single player, like, you know, or treating the game as a single player game where your teammates are essentially bots, as never helping your team. There are times where you should help your team, gank your team, whatever. It just needs to be when it's going to benefit you, or when you realize you're not the carry of the game. So some games you're going to get a bot who's better than you, who's, you know, 5-0 early game when you're, say, you know, 0-1-4 or whatever it is. And when you have a really fed teammate, oftentimes you want to play around them because they're the carry of the game. And so even though, again, you're treating your teammates as bots, doesn't mean you're not going to help them. So if you have a really fed person who's doing really, really well, maybe you will skip a jungle camp to go gank them earlier and help them out in this type of thing. And then after that as well, one more of mine are like a benefit as well, is that you don't really have to follow teams' dumb plays if you treat them as bots. Because if they're a bot, you're not like going to feel as needed to kind of just follow them for no reason. It's not really going to feel as necessary to you. So you can kind of, you know, not deal with teammates' basically dumb decisions as often, which helps a lot, because following teams' dumb decisions is usually the way that a lot of people will lose the game, even when they kind of know what play they should have done. And so that's definitely something that's important to keep in mind as well, is just like, you won't follow your teammates' dumb plays as much if you're playing a bit more selfish and all that. But also make sure that you're paying attention to teammates' location before you make a play. Like, that's another thing. You can't just go in and make the right play if none of your team is there. So it definitely, you know, requires you to not literally think of the team as bots. Like, I want to make this clear. So going into kind of what should you actually do? Usually the answer to most questions is a little bit of both, right? And that's obviously kind of going to be the answer here. Basically, you can't just treat your teammates as if they're literal bots. Like, they are going to sometimes make plays that you have to react to. If your teammates aren't following up when they should be, you have to understand that that's just the reality. You have to, you know, change your game plan sometimes based on your teammates' plays, especially when it comes to important objectives, like when there's an Elder or a Baron or a Soul. When there's these really important objectives, sometimes you do have to change the way that you're playing or the decisions you're making based around your teammates' actions. But most of the time, making the consistently right play is going to be a lot more valuable than following up on your teammates' suboptimal plays. And that's largely because, again, of kind of how solo queue works and everything like that, that it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be following too many of these dumb plays from your teammates in a majority of games. And so overall, I would say I definitely think you guys should have the mindset of playing quite selfishly, thinking of your teammates essentially as people who you shouldn't really listen to unless they prove to you that you should listen to them. So, you know, again, in the middle of the game, if they start popping off, okay, maybe then that's the one teammate we'll actually listen to. But in a majority of games, kind of go into with the mindset, I need to carry this game by myself. I need to do whatever I can to get myself stronger. And then the last really important thing to mention is that it depends on your champion pool as well. If you're playing Nami, Lulu, Janna, Melio, then you're going to have to think of it as more of a team game, because your champion can't solo carry the game, of course, right? Like, you have to be attaching yourself to your strongest member and playing more around them, following that person, letting them make a lot of, you know, the calls. That's why I generally recommend for solo queue playing more carry focused champions or champions with decent agency. So it doesn't always have to be a straight hyper carry assassin, you know, like Zed or Echo, or like, you know, a mage like Syndra, whatever. It doesn't have to be that. You can still carry on a tank like Ornn, and you can still do a lot with a rather selfish mindset on these champions. But when you're playing a champion like Ornn, or again, like we said, you know, with the enchanters, whatever, you have to be a bit more, you know, leaning towards helping your team out, playing around them, rather than just purely playing really selfish. So yeah, overall, main point of this video was kind of just to tell you guys sort of how my mindset is when I'm playing ranked. I sort of think of my teammates as bots generally, and I feel this works really well. I mean, I climb pretty high in solo queue frequently. When Challenger was the highest rank in the game, I'd hit, you know, Challenger solo queue. Every season that I hit Sovereign, I'm often playing like half duo, half solo. And then once I get to Sovereign, I play solo queue from Sovereign. So I've been as high as 162 marks from 100 marks playing only solo queue. This season, I'm already 130 marks playing solo queue once I got Sovereign. And next season, I plan to do solo queue only to Sovereign. So I also, you know, plan to do that to help you guys out, hopefully. So yeah, that's basically it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.